This is the Gang of Witches Ibiza podcast, hosted by Jo Youle. Each new moon, we'll explore with our guests how to think globally and act locally with ecofeminism. Awaken all your senses. The spirit of the witches comes to your ears. The Sabbath is that way. Gang of Witches.
Welcome back to the Gang of Witches Ibiza podcast with me, Jo Youle. And it's been so good to have a little break away from this series to get re-inspired. I hope that your summer also gave you some of that same medicine. But to re-begin, I felt perhaps it was time to cover off some of the stories closer to home within the activist scene that exists on Ibiza, to see how the women who do act stay incentivised to do so in times like these, but also how they feel about what's playing out on a local versus global stage currently, especially as summer begins to draw to a close, but in particular a summer like the one we just had when things finally began to return to normal. And for today's episode, we'll be chatting to three women who head up XR Ibiza, which is of course Extinction Rebellion. All three of these women have been intrinsic to the making of this series and have inspired me through our conversations. So it feels organic to have them on today's episode to chat with me today.
Hello, my name's Karen Killeen. I'm from Ireland, but I've been living in Ibiza since 1982.
My name's Tania. Somebody recognized me for Tania Moon. I'm from Valencia and I live in Ibiza from 2011.
Hello, I'm Barbara Di Giacinto. I am Italian and I've been living in Ibiza since the 99.
So I think, it would be interesting to kick off by, just defining what Extinction Rebellion is. I believe, globally, sometimes it never gets the best of press and it's portrayed in a way that's controversial. And I think it would be nice to hear it from you, the members of Extinction Rebellion Ibiza, to understand, exactly what it is and what they do.
A very good question. Extinction Rebellion is a social movement. People refer to us as an ecological movement, but it's much more than that. It's an eco-social movement, and our demands are that the governments and the media say the truth about the ecological devastation that's going on, which is causing climate change, and that they reduce emissions as soon as possible to net zero, and this is achieved through real democracy. So we talk about citizens' assemblies. And we also have added a fourth demand, which is climate justice.
Sí, para mí Extinction Rebellion es un movimiento que engloba todas.
Yes, for me, this is a movement that encompasses all the difficulties and all the problems that currently exist on the planet, and that unites all the crises, the social, the climatic, the ecological, and the policies that are affecting us right now. And that is why I think that when I found XR, I felt like the solution to all these problems that were ahead of us. But after 4 years in the movement, I see that there are many people who still have not understood it, and we have to continue. We have to continue to act so that people see that the problems do not come from one side. They are all united under the same banner, that in the end is the climate crisis.
It's an international movement, decentralized and no political partisan, that use no violent action, civil disobedience, and the reason is why we want to minimize the risk of social collapse, making also the government act very fast on the climate and social crisis.
Thank you, ladies, for clarification. I think it's really important to understand that from the beginning of this conversation. I know that you have other work that you do as an activist as well, but I think, let's begin with just asking you, what does it mean to be an activist?
Being an activist changes your life. because it changes the way you see the world, and the way you see other people, other countries, other societies. It's to me, it's accepting responsibility. As I became an activist and discovered more and more and more, I realized how privileged I am to have had such a life, so many things, let's say, such well-being. And I feel the need to utilize this privilege to help others. And I really feel we should all be doing it, because it's quite fun at the same time. But it drives you, but it also opens up your eyes to so many things.
Para mí ser activista es un modo de vida.
For me, being an activist is a way of life. Now I can't conceive of living without it, without being an activist, because really, if we are not all activists, the compilations do not get solved. Being an activist doesn't have to mean going to cut off a street or I don't know, to do some of the things we do. We would like not to have to do them. I also want to make it clear that we don't do things for the sake of it. We do it because we think it's necessary to call attention in some way, since we are in the most delicate moment in the history of humanity. From my point of view, being an activist can be done in many ways, simply by not eating meat or buying in big fashion chains, etc. That is already a way of being an activist, or simply sharing the things that activists who are in the front line are doing. It's also part of being an activist. You don't have to go and block a street or lock yourself up somewhere to be an activist. I think you can be an activist in many ways, and it's a way of life that you choose, whether to be on the front line, second line or third line, but that we should all have an obligation to do it in the moment that we are in, from the history of mankind. That
for me, being an activist means be able to have a critical thinking about what happened around the world and about around your local place. I mean, in my opinion, shouldn't even exist the word activist, because if you are connected with what's around you and you are empathetic and I say you have a critical thing, I mean, you are connected with the reality you live, you act. I mean, you don't disturb them, you don't destroy it, you don't abuse. It just comes to you. So this is my idea in generally. Of course, be an activist in the sense of be part of action, disruptive action, or also dangerous means be a little bit brave and courageous, yeah? Because this can affect your normal style of life, can affect your family, can affect a lot of aspects of your life. So it's a decision that can compromise the comfort life you probably have in most of the case, in this, especially in the north, in the global north. For this reason, I also think that it's a privilege to be in this part of the world, can be an activist without risk every day your life, like happen in other places like Brazil, Colombia. So I really think that I have to do it. I must do it because what I see is not the world I want for me and for any other person or animal or plant also.
I think it's really beautiful to be able to understand a little bit more about what, drove you and what inspires you to continue to show up and keep acting. I think that's really important. I think, that moment, that decisive moment to act and continue to commit to acting. But, what was that moment that inspired you to become an activist? Maybe you met someone, maybe you read something, maybe you attended an event. What was that, seminal moment that drove you forward?
I'm trying to think of the exact moment, and I think it was probably watching an activist on YouTube, a vegan activist, because I was already vegan, and for the animals at the time, and then seeing how these activists could talk to people and teach and inform and educate. I thought, I could do that, and I didn't. But but the seed was planted, and then Extinction Rebellion came along, and I'd always been kind of socially aware of injustices, but didn't know what I could do. And suddenly seeing It was again on YouTube, Sky Television, those Extinction Rebellion activists in the British Parliament taking their tops off, and the coverage it got, and the expressions of the politicians who were just gobsmacked. I thought, yeah, that works. That we need to do more of that. So I found out about Extinction Rebellion, and I realised that that it was a movement that could really bring about change. And I had no second thoughts. I was there from day one.
Yo recuerdo cuando era pequeña que veía acciones de Greenpeace
I remember when I was little, I used to see Greenpeace actions or environmental movements, and I always said, wow, when I grew up, I would like to do that. I wish it didn't have to be done, but unfortunately, there have to be people who do it. When I joined Extinction Rebellion, and earlier you were asking Karen about being naked, that was me. I got naked in front of the council when the oil company Prospection came into the island, and we threw fish at them, and we got naked on the beach, and then we were naked in the street, all covered in oil. Then we were also naked in front of the Consell with dead fish. And after that, well, then came Extinction Rebellion, and after the first talk and seeing that non-violent direct actions really worked and have worked throughout history, so it kind of made me have more desire and more strength to go ahead and do it and fight for things that I don't think should be fought for, because they should be that way. Period. But unfortunately, we have to be there. And some of us have to put ourselves on the front line and fight for the social and climate justice that the world and the people deserve.
I think I've actually seen the pictures of you covered in oil. They kind of made a lot of the front pages, of course, of the UK tabloids because they love a bit of that. But yeah, I think that's amazing. And that was the moment that, I really kind of became fully aware of, I think, the island's fight for its ecological health, essentially. And that's also when I met Sandra Benveniste, who's also been on the podcast, because she was a really great role model in that whole movement. So, yeah, well done you. What about you, Barbara?
I can tell you exactly the moment, because if I watch my life, I always felt very connected with the justice and injustice, because first of all, I come from a place where I really suffered the patriarchal system on my personal life. So I have to really deal with it since I was a very little girl. And from there, I develop more and more this sense of I have to be brave and I have to fight for what I think is right. Also, being an artist and work through art as a tools to create awareness was important, is important, because made me realize that the only thing I really wanted to do through art was exactly this: speak about how we can really redesign our presence on this planet, how we can redesign our relation with an ecocentric view more than egocentric and Anthropocene vision of life, of world also. So for this reason, when I knew about Extinction Rebellion, I see also how they use art was for me an enlightenment. Like that, this is the moment I want to join, because it's not about only the ecological crisis. It's about justice, social justice. We include the ecological crisis and also the climate change and all the rest. I mean, all the multiplier crises we have now: alimentation, food crisis, and energy, whatever. It's all part of the same cancer. So this is the reason why I thought, okay, just be what you are. So as I tell you before, I don't think I'm an activist. I'm a person who are connected with what's around there. No, this is my vision about it.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I mean, yeah, I'm loving this conversation. I think these are really interesting things to understand. What makes, I think, one of our previous guests talked about being an armchair activist, and we all get these petitions and emails kind of in our inbox where, we really want to kind of act on them, but it's not the same as what you guys are doing, where you're actually kind of going out and really kind of enforcing, or at least trying to make positive change. I think it'd be interesting to hear, what would you say the most meaningful campaign that you've played a part in, or maybe what's meant the most to you in terms of change that you were a big or even just a small part of?
That's a difficult one because there are quite a few. Off the top of my hat, I think being part of Scientist Rebellion, which has come about since Extinction Rebellion, and it's scientists who are giving up their day job and doing civil disobedience, and they've been organising actions and organised one last year, and it was open for scientists and academics, so they kind of let me in, and I think about 200 of us threw paint or dye on the Spanish Parliament, and we were subsequently arrested and so forth. I'm now one of the 14 that they chose to be under investigation as a terrorist, apparently. And we did that. It was on my birthday, I remember. And when it came into the news that we were being investigated by the terrorist squad, it was one of the hottest days in Spain. It was the 4th of June, which was really, really hot. So it really hit the press, and that it was absolutely crazy that they were treating these scientists, very famous scientists, well-known scientists, writers, journalists, were all arrested. And this has made quite a difference as to how civil disobedience and activism is viewed in Spain. Because it was no longer some long-haired, tree-hugging hippies who were out with banners or blocking a street, but suddenly it was academics and people in white coats and scientists who were saying, we're not going to write any more reports. Why bother? Because nobody's paying any attention. So it's getting a lot of following. I think Scientist Rebellion is really, we're going to see a lot more of Scientist Rebellion, a lot more of scientists becoming activists because the science is not being listened to by our leaders.
And how were you treated when you were arrested?
Well, there's one thing retenido, which is how we were treated by the police at the time, which has happened to me a few times. Most actions you do in Spain, they hold you on the streets for a number of hours as they identify. It's very, very different to what happens in the UK. And I was fine. I wasn't manhandled. Some were. But then they let us go after a number of hours, and the arrest took place in Ibiza. The police came to my door, the plainclothes police, knocked on the door and said, "Are you Karen Killeen?" "Yes, I am." And I was summoned to go to the police station in Ibiza the following day, where I was told I was under arrest. And I'm thinking, oh my God, my dog's at home. But I'm under arrest, but I'm not detained. I'm being investigated. A number of us are. So we may have a trial, or I'm not quite sure yet. Wow. But there was such a hullabaloo about it, I think now that it probably won't go to trial. We'll probably just get a fine, which is what happens in Spain.
Send a little kitty pot round for you at the end of this podcast and see if we can rustle up a few euros and get your fine paid for you. What about you, Tania?
Para mí, he estado en algunas acciones importantes.
I've been in some important actions personally. The one that has impacted me the most is the one that I didn't want to do because I think I wasn't prepared enough. It was sitting on the Gran Via.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Sentarme en...
Take your time, no problem, no pressure. Okay. All girls together.
No sé si lo voy a poder hacer. Bueno, fue una acción que estábamos en Madrid, la Semana de Acciones, el año pasado. Y una de ellas era Rebellion of One.
I never did something like this before, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it again, but we were in Madrid during the Week of Actions last year, and some of us sat down cutting off a whole street, one person alone, with the help of others, and we were there. I was blocking for a while the Gran Via in Madrid, 2 of the lanes, I think, with a sign that said, I'm afraid that my daughter will die because of the climate crisis. And I was very shocked to see how children who know how to read looked at the sign and look at me, right? And the parents too. But like people were passing by, not like you were a beggar or something. But well, I really liked the visual connection with people, with the children. We were there. There was Barbara, there was Karen, and then the police came. I got scared, and Karen sat down beside me and for me, and well, there we were. That was one of the actions that, like personally, I feel did the most. Then we have also been with all the comrades of the rebellion in the camp in front of the Ministry of Ecological Transition. That was the first one we did. And well, from then on, once you start, it's like you have to keep doing it. You have to keep doing it because, as Barbara had said in some of the answers, it is justice, social justice, climate justice for everyone and for all. And if we don't act now, maybe our children and the children of those who are listening to this podcast will not have a very nice future or any future at all.
I knew this would happen. The tissues are out on the podcast. We're all sitting around having a little moment together. Okay, so obviously, Barbara, I'm really sorry that had to happen to you, but I think it's very powerful that, you know, this is a conversation or a thing that no one's really talking about. You know, what about the kids that are being born now? What about people's young children? It is a narrative I think that a lot of people are burying their head in the sand about, but it's got to be discussed. So, I mean, you were there, Barbara, as well, alongside Tania, and you, of course, Karen, as well, supporting each other as women do in the middle of the road in Madrid. And what happened next?
In this case, I was my role was to mediate with the police. And I tell you the truth, when I saw arrive all these police, big men, almost 2 meter high, jump on me and say, "What are you doing in the middle of the big road, the biggest road in Madrid?" I was like, I take a breath. I thought to him, "Look, I am a mother," and I try to stay, and I start to speak with him, and I signed my other friends on the Tania and Karen also on the floor, because also Karen, she was sitting on the other side of the road. We blocked 2 parts of but we always leave a free part for the ambulance, so we don't really make it disturb emergencies, like emergency, like somebody is, some accident, whatever. But they was very, at the beginning they arrived very aggressive, but after that, when I started to speak with them and try to explain to them why we are there, we were there, he told me, okay, he started to relax and treat me very well. But after that, arrived other police. It was not so polite, and we have to just move all the Tania and Karen and everybody. And but anyway, the action was fine, and a lot of people around, kids, mother, and family. Just some of them, they really get shocked that they saw us like these people are not crazy people. People are normal people, are mother, and maybe younger or older, and as people, why they do something like that? Why they risk in the middle of Gran Via in Madrid to get insulted from people? People get aggressive also because you stop a big road in Madrid. So it's a lot of emotion, anyway, it was a big challenge to be there. But in my case, one of the, let's say, most impactful action was in the last years, because I have some experiences from the past which are also quite strong. But with Extinction Rebellion was also in Palma de Mallorca. When I hang myself, it was like a fiction, of course, but I was on top of a big piece of ice, and I have a cord, a rope around my neck. The action was, we want to say to the government that we will lose time, and the ice is melting. We lose, and we will probably die because the massive extinction is on the corner. And this was like a performance, but the experience to be there with this on top of this small piece of ice with my food and stay hour, because we stay there a few hours, was quite
was not so nice, to be honest. Also because I remind me an experience I had in Italy when I was a teenager, in an action which is not at the time was not pacific. Let's say was not violent, and not because the movement stood the anti-fascism and the movement against the fascists was a little bit more violent, no? And the dynamic, has gone through violent. So I got stuck in a place. And I couldn't really move because I had like a chain. It was against like almost a performance, but it's become a tragedy at some point. So for me, it was a bad experience. And in Palma, I felt this memory. So sometimes is when you be part of this kind of action, is a lot emotionally. Is a lot because you have your past who comes out, and this is the challenge also, no, to leave the fear inside and say, okay, the reason why I do this is because I really believe now is the moment.
Yeah, very often when you're doing an action, some actions you can be hours in one place or in one position, whether during the action or in prison, or if you're held by the police in a certain place, you're just held there and the police surround you, especially in Spain. And it's at that moment that you really reflect on why you're there. And it's a really emotional time because you feel the justice, the righteousness of what you're doing. And we feel it's maybe not the only way, but it is a way, and a way that has been proven to work to move the awareness, to move the Overton window, as we say, and get people talking about the issue. As you say, people prefer to look away, and because we know we're right, we do it. But when you're there, all the suffering goes through your mind. And justifies your action.
Well, thank you for acting on our behalf. And yeah, you're almost inspiring me to want to join Extinction Rebellion. And I'm sure many other people who are listening are thinking, well, maybe it's time to also, come and support you ladies, which I think would be a very beautiful outcome of this particular podcast. What are the main points of activism that you're working on locally in Ibiza? Because I can imagine, living on an island like this, I've had conversations individually with all three of you in the past about, things that are happening on Ibiza. Obviously, this year we've gone back to the normal model of tourism and the influx of people coming here. And I'm sure that this has highlighted and been quite triggering for you in terms of the work that you do. So what is it, what's your kind of number one thing that you're kind of focusing on currently? Did you want to begin, or you're going to go back to you, Karen?
You've asked a number of questions, and I'd like to address one to start, because there are a number of things that need to be talked about here. And the first is how I felt about this return to business as usual in Ibiza. And what we're seeing a massive destruction of our ecosystems and of our resources. Seeing all these private jets, you realise that the airport of Ibiza is number 1 for private jets in Spain and number 3 in Europe. And the emissions of private jets are just sky high. That's not a pun. Private jets, mega yachts, cruise ships, traffic, consumerism, this opulent lifestyle. How do I feel? Initially very, very angry. And then I have to take a step back and say, I was there not that long ago. It was only maybe 4 or 5 years ago I was on a mega yacht or on a powerboat going on a trip to Formentera and thinking I was the bee's knees. So we've all been there and thought that a powerboat was happiness, because that's what the media tells us and that's what you see on Instagram or whatever. And so now I try and curtail this anger and which then turns into frustration, and understand. But people need to realise that we cannot carry on like this. So that's how I feel about what's happening in Ibiza. That we need to act on this current model. But what we're actually doing, personally, I'm not doing that much. Others will tell you that they are doing more, because personally I'm now involved with more other movements on the mainland. So there is a void of action in Ibiza right now on what I just mentioned: mega yachts, cruise ships, private jets.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. And Tania, what are you? What's the main thing you're focusing your attention on right now?
Ahora mismo, sinceramente, para ser honesta.
Yes, the truth is that this summer what I have felt is that we have not learned anything. As you say, I'm a DJ. For me, what used to be a dream of maybe traveling the world in my private jet, listening to such and such, now seems to be a total aberration. Totally. I would never do that now. Moreover, I think there are several clubs on the island to which I would not go even if they paid me for the way they manage things, etc. The big clubs. I will not say the name, but I wouldn't play there now. Luckily, this year I'm playing in places that I think are not so aggressive with the island. And, well, it saddens me enormously to see the cruise ships every day throwing that terrible smoke for 24 hours that pollutes more than 12,000 cars on the island. It horrifies me to see the number of private jets that come with my professional colleagues. Well, that's how it is. And well, regarding my profession, well, I'm even not afraid, but I'm even afraid of being called to go and DJ anywhere in the world, because I don't know what I'm going to say. I don't want to take planes to go and DJ 24 hours a day in a place where I'll probably do it. I'm not going to say I'm never ever going to do it, but I'm going to do it as little as possible. And this is a gringo. So what I'm going to say is that I will try to offset my ecological footprint in some way in the event that I have to live, because I think my profession right now is a pretty polluting profession, and I will try to do it as best and consciously as I can from now on.
Okay, from one side, what I see is that Ibiza is a kind of micro world where all the wars happen all at the same time, in terms of CO2 emission, in terms of depredation of tourism, the tourism which is completely unconscious, no? Unconscious, sorry, my English. Also because we really, the administration, the let's say the system, the political system, they really don't want to see the reality, and they keep going with the same model or the same paradigm, or call it as you want, which will not help us to face the imminent collapse which will happen, because it's not Extinction Rebellion or Barbara who say that. It is the analysis all around the world, scientists and people who knows much better than us what's going on. They speak and say, they advise us for many years, from the 70s. But now, in the last 10 years, every day we have the demonstration that this will happen, and it's happening already now, no? To see what's going on in Ibiza for months without raining, no, for example. But put on side the climate story and speak about more economy and tourism. We could really change model and still make Ibiza as a place where people wants to come and visit, but kind of more on the model, the pilgrimage. Because if you go with this view of life, and you respect more what you have around, the limit of one place. For example, we can't afford to have a million of tourism because we don't have the resource in terms of water, in terms of food, or maybe you can eat in Ibiza what you eat probably in another part of the world. You have to eat a local food, and you have to make a possible to renew also the cycle of the soil and the products they come from there. So this is not a new story. We have a lot of movement in Ibiza. They speak about this since 20 years, and I'm very glad to be part of some of them, or better to learn from them. And I'm actually now part of San Jose Transition, and the inspiration from Transition Town Movement. And locally, my work now is focused to create networks between a different kind of movement and organization. They have a really good project, but probably the most of the people, they are not involved in permaculture and the new vision and transition. They don't know anything about it, and the goal is to make these people aware about we have the chance to do things different. And then we can push the local authority to join force. It's not about push. It's better say it's time to do to create a cooperative work, collaboration. This nourish the sense of community and relocalize the resource, human resource, ecological resource, whatever we need to make Ibiza, not only Ibiza, the Balearic Islands, kind of resilient place where we're going to live, and we make possible to live for the new generation.
I don't know if this is relevant, but I was just reading today a new study has come out by the technical group who are advising the Balearic government. I think the study came out yesterday, if I'm not wrong. And this is a group of technicians, experts, we should say in English, who are advising the local government. Some have been activists in the past. And I think the role now of us activists on the ground is that their report is put into practice by the government.
That's amazing. I'm very, very glad you heard it here first. Breaking news on the Gang of Witches Ibiza podcast. Thank you, Karen, for that little addition there. Let's move on to, what did you see this summer specifically? We've kind of alluded to it right there that, perhaps you might be feeling that the current economic model still needs a little bit of work because I think the modality of the island obviously returned, as we said, to the economical, monoculture of tourism as normal. I'm interested, I think, on this particular question, how it made you feel. Obviously we've witnessed what happens when there isn't tourism here. It's a disaster. People go hungry. There are queues at the food bank. That doesn't work. And we know that is the case. However, it must have been quite uncomfortable to also see the things and all the things you're working towards kind of perhaps take a step back. So I'm wondering, not just, how did it make you feel, but what do you think that the answer could be to changing the current economic model that exists? What do you think about that?
Well, I think we have to learn to be more self-sufficient. It started during the pandemic, in that I think up before the pandemic, 2% of produce was local, and after the pandemic, it's 10%. I may have the facts slightly wrong, but so we did learn to plant our own vegetables. I don't know what's happening now. I don't know if that's continuing. So much land is not being utilised here because, of course, it's more rewarding for people to leave the land and go and work as a waiter. And we need to get back to the land. And then you won't have the queues in the food bank. Now, whether Ibiza can feed all the people who come to Ibiza, that's another kettle of fish. But that's why we need to not have as many. We cannot have this massive tourism because that involves huge imports, which is, unsustainable, etc., etc. Now, a whole new industry or way of economy in Ibiza. Yes, I'm no expert. It needs to be maybe decided with citizens' assemblies and local people deciding how the local economy can thrive without being totally dependent on tourism.
You talk about this citizens' assembly idea, which I love, and I think maybe you need to explain what actually that is that XR are proposing here, because it feels like that is exactly, as you've said, with the employment of bringing activists to advise the local government. Okay, that's a step in the right direction, but what would a citizens' assembly look like for you?
A citizens' assembly is not activists advising the government. I don't think that's what you meant anyway. A citizens' assembly is it's like a jury, whereas people are chosen by, it's called sortition. The system exists, and it's a proven system. It works. And they are totally representative of the population that they are debating on. So you'd have young, old, foreigners, locals, rich, poor, right, left. It has to be totally representative. For a whole country, you're talking about maybe 150 people. It's not huge. And these people then are given in training in cognitive thinking and are given all the facts by experts and then deliberate. It's facilitated deliberation in small groups and they come to a consensus. So you have the old person speaking to the young person, the foreigner with the local, the negation, the denier with the progressive. You know, you actually create a dialogue, and once there is consensus, they would then make proposals to the government. Prior to holding the Citizens' Assembly, of course, it's decided whether these proposals are binding or whether they're then put to a referendum. But it's totally transparent, and the general public knows what's going on. That's very important. So that when these proposals are put forward, which might be unpopular if they were put forward by a politician, but because the people have put them forward, well, then the rest of the society will accept them because they're logical. For example, we had a citizens' assembly on the climate in France, and from that there's now talk of reducing flights, speed limits, all sorts of things like that otherwise people wouldn't accept. Yeah.
That's a very interesting thought process on that, because I think, I don't know really who. Obviously, we know that the Balearic government is the decider of a lot of things, but it'd be very interesting, I think, maybe on another episode to kind of dive a little bit deeper into the decision-making process on a lot of these very important issues, because nobody seems to really know who is in power and how that all kind of really works. And I think that maybe that is something for further investigation. Tania, talk to us about, what you felt about the summer. I mean, obviously you also work as a DJ. Your job is reasonably dependent as well on doing the things that you do, which is, that's your passion. And of course, that's important. But so how does that, how does this play out for you in terms of what you've been witnessing this summer?
What I have felt is that we have not learned anything.
Este verano lo que he sentido es que no hemos aprendido nada.
What used to be a dream of maybe traveling the world in my private jet, listening to such and such, now seems to be a total aberration. Totally. I would never do that now. Moreover, I think there are several clubs on the island to which I would not go even if they paid me for the way they manage things, etc. The big clubs. I will not say the name, but I wouldn't play there now. Luckily, this year I'm playing in places that I think are not so aggressive with the island. And, well, it saddens me enormously to see the cruise ships. The cruise ships every day throwing that terrible smoke for 24 hours that pollutes more than 12,000 cars on the island. It horrifies me to see the number of private jets that come with my professional colleagues. Well, that's how it is. And well, regarding my profession, well, I'm even not afraid, but I'm even afraid of being called to go and DJ anywhere in the world, because I don't know what I'm going to say. I don't want to take planes to go and DJ 24 hours a day in a place where I'll probably do it. I'm not going to say I'm never ever going to do it, but I'm going to do it as little as possible. And this is a gringo. So what I'm going to say is that I will try to offset my ecological footprint in some way in the event that I have to live, because I think my profession right now is a pretty polluting profession, and I will try to do it as best and consciously as I can from now on.
I mean, for sure, it's a mass dilemma that you're facing there. And I think, it is a conversation that we've had many times on the podcast, about this kind of transient nature of the DJ industry. And, I spoke to a lot of the directors of the IMS, the International Music Summit, back, in April about that exact subject. And I feel, it is... Yeah, it's kind of impossible for DJs to change that storyline as long as they are catching flights with the rest of the general public and not, doing the private jet story. For the current timing, it is a problem and it is a massive issue. I mean, I guess you either don't earn as much money, don't take the gigs, and then you've got being forced to find something else to do. But that's, maybe not possible in this lifetime,
Sí, yo creo que, es muy difícil, pero tampoco...
Yes, I think it is very difficult, but not impossible. I think that many things can be changed. Maybe we could think about playing in more local places, closer, and instead of taking planes, you can try to take cars, trains, boats, etc. Maybe not go to play in places that are on the other side of the ocean and focus more. Just like we have to relocate agriculture by relocating our work. It would be an option.
Barbara, let's move on to, how did you find this summer and what were those kind of feelings perhaps that you kind of experienced as you were driving around or going to places and witnessing the changes again?
To be honest, quite sad. Sad because it's like when you see somebody who's every day in the middle of the street and you see the truck come on you to just kill you and you stay there and you don't do anything, no? It's like the division of the island. Like all the people knows that something is wrong, something that doesn't work. No, we have the experience already. I mean, I can't believe that people, you don't have to be a master or be a scientist to understand that the economy right now and the system we have doesn't work. But I also understand that for a lot of people it's difficult. It's a fear in between who push people to don't think about how we can pretend another system on the island. I speak about pretend because I also believe that we have politicians and people who works in the administration that are very nice person and they really love the island and they're also they are really empathetic with the common good. For them it's difficult if we don't have the support of the people, the citizen. For this reason we have to unite forces and start to work in the direction of this collaborative economy that we can create now. Now is the moment. So my sadness is not because the world will finish, because also, okay, when I see the desert, Ibiza has become a desert. I live in the Campo, and before I had a lot of animal around, and now I can see that everything is a big change. Can hear the bird like before, and everything is changed, and this is make me very sad. When I also try to connect with the Madre Natura, the Pachamama, whatever we want to call, but back to the business and to the economy and to the reality in Ibiza, we can't blame people who they are on the government. We just need to take action. That doesn't mean block a road on and simulated a killing, a suicide for the climate change, but we need to operate together, start to make a plan in the short, medium and long terms that how we want to see the island and our life from now to the next day. Because anyway, we will face we have to accept that we need to deep adaptation and mitigation against what will arrive, because it's already here. I mean, and not a lot of water, extreme temperature, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to say all this because I know all the people knows already that. So for me, what I would like to transmit is that we can do it. We have a lot of resources on the island. We have an amazing project on the island, amazing people, brilliant people comes all over the world. There are also some of them very connected to the rules of Ibiza because they live here maybe since 40 years. And they even speak also Catalan. That is also nice because they connect even more with the local people, the países, that are also part of the transition.
I mean, obviously we've addressed, some of the changes that have returned to business as usual, as you put it, Karen. And I think, there's obviously things that everybody has an opinion about the way things could evolve. And perhaps, as you said, the employment of a citizens' assembly and kind of coming together, I think, of the people and what, the people that actually live here really, really want, and perhaps that's not fully represented within, you know, the governmental organisation as it currently stands. So I guess, you know, it's a combination of like, what do we see that those, where do we see those changes beginning? What is the initial implementation that we can actually do to kind of move the story forward? But ultimately, like how, you know, how could that actually begin to change in terms of moving the citizens' assembly into place and addressing that, maybe not through action in the traditional sense of the word, as you say, chaining yourself to fences and getting arrested on runways, but, you know, more in terms of, you know, logical ways that we as a community on the island of Ibiza could come together and drive, you know, a campaign forward to bring our voices to the fore, because I feel like there's not that many people, obviously Extinction Rebellion, and there's lots of great movements. I know you've got one specifically that you work on, but how do we amplify our voices to really get them heard?
You've asked there about how we amplify our voices, and you've mentioned citizens' assemblies. It doesn't necessarily have to be through a citizens' assembly to amplify our voices. I think what's really important is that people face up to the reality and recognise that things are going to get worse before they get better. That it's here, that the temperature was up to 32 degrees, I think, in the Mediterranean this summer. And once they recognise that, they have two choices: either ignore it and be part of the problem, or do something about it. And people have been ignoring because it's unpleasant to face it. But now, as it becomes even more drastic, I think people are now beginning to say, "Oh gosh, Karen, you were right. What you were saying 2 years ago." Yeah, I know. It's science. But people are now beginning to come round. And I don't think it'll take much now for when we get this movement going locally that Barbara was speaking about, that people will start joining in and saying, yes, we realise that there needs to be a change. And whether that's through a citizens' assembly or through just local people coming together, that's the way to do it. The citizens' assembly is from the top down. It's something that's imposed by the government, and the people decide. So whereas what Barbara was speaking about, and what I think is necessary now for the island, is something much more, bringing all the different associations together. Associations and working groups and people and neighbours associations and school mums, and they all need to somehow accept what's happening. I think we're past finding out. They know.
Why do you think people ignore the situation until it's actually on top of them when the temperature hits that kind of heat? Why is it that people are not listening?
It's human nature. There was a good documentary by Deutsche Welle, the German TV station, last week, and it explains scientifically why. There are reasons. People don't react until they have to. It's people are scared that it will mean changing their lifestyle. Also, they don't see an alternative. It's like, I recognise that, but I don't see what's the alternative. And if the alternative is worse than what I already have, then I pretend it's not happening. And if I not only pretend, but actually find a narrative that will deny it in some way, that's fantastic. I'll choose that one, because I'll choose the narrative that goes with what I want to believe, because it's uncomfortable. But once you accept it, yes, it changes your life, and yes, it can bring you sadness, but it also brings you a kind of peace that, you know, it's going to get worse, or it's already there. We've been lucky so far. We've missed the bullet, but other countries haven't. But once you accept it, then you accept that you can do something about it. You don't have to. You can just decide to live the best life you can and be as kind as you can and as empathetic as you can locally.
But we wouldn't be sitting here having that conversation if we lived in Pakistan.
If we lived in Pakistan, we'd be underwater. A third of Pakistan is underwater right now through no fault of their own. I presume that's why you brought it up. And maybe Pakistan will be a tipping point for people to realise that they can't look the other way. I mean, Antonio Gutierrez, the Secretary General of United Nations, said that Pakistan doesn't need solidarity; it needs justice. It is our moral a moral imperative that we help Pakistan and help all these global South countries that were mentioned earlier, who are now suffering the calamities of climate change due to no fault of their own. Remember that Pakistan, the glacier melt has not been caused by the emissions from Pakistan. They've been caused by the emissions which are historically and presently ours. So our private jets and our mega yachts, our consumption is causing, not directly obviously, is causing Pakistan and other emergencies. And people, it's painful to face that. But we need to face it and need to step up to our responsibility and use our privilege.
I was teaching yoga a few weeks back at a rather large house on the side of a mountain, and as I looked out into the distance, I could not get over how many enormous boats going through the sea. It was like, wow. And only last week I was at a ceremony in Talamanca, and I looked out and this apartment block seemingly was sailing past, and I was like, holy moly, I didn't even know that boats that big could go through the Balearic Sea, which was kind of like a bit of a revelation. And I think, you've got a point there. You can't turn a blind eye on what's going on in Pakistan. I think, it's just the first thing where people are really starting to go, Jesus, that's serious. And as you say, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And we don't want to end on this note, so I'm going to move on to Tania. Go on, Karen.
I just want to say that the media doesn't cover it the way it should. I mean, we're talking about Pakistan because Pakistan is in your face. It's terrible, but nobody's talking about the drought in China, which is horrendous, much more than Europe, and has been long and hot. And we ignore this and look away at our peril because, of course, what happens in China affects us as well.
It does, but seemingly not enough to take any major action apart from, the wonderful work that you guys are doing. Tania, I mean, for you, how do you feel the next step, evolving? What would you like to see as the initial part of big change moving forward?
A mí me gustaría que todas las personas, porque
I would like everyone, because everyone has to a greater or lesser extent knows what is going on, to stop denying what is happening right now. I think it is a way of self-protection, but it is leading us to a collective suicide. What I want is that people react, accept and see that the systemic collapse is already here. It is coming, and what we have to do is to decrease that collapse. I know these are words that people do not like, but if we don't do it, if we all keep looking the other way, it is going to come anyway, but in a very ugly, destructive way, with violence and so on. We want this to happen in a peaceful and orderly manner, because it is going to happen. It is happening. We are already living. So this cannot be denied or ignored, nor can we look the other way. So we have to accept and work on adapting to the times that are coming in the best possible way for everyone.
I'm grateful to listen to your opinions. I mean, I think it's really important, and I don't know, having not given these voices a platform previously in lots of ways, obviously you do the amazing work that you do, but I feel like it's very interesting to hear this specifically in this kind of environment, because it's easier, I think, for people to try to wrap their heads around it in a calm fashion, perhaps at their own leisure when they're out for a walk in Ibiza, in the camper, whatever, and they can listen to this podcast and really, understand and get to grips with what it is that what we need to do. And I think there's not enough conversations happening in Ibiza. There's definitely a hell of a lot more than there ever has been before. But, you guys are doing brilliant things. But I think, this conversation needs to result in actual action. So, Barbara, let's finish with you today. What, for you, what's the kind of number one way that you would like to see Ibiza evolve? Where could the conversation begin? Where would that initial spark of initiative come from?
Wow, such a big question. I love to think about in terms of process and interconnection between a state of mind and things we have to do, or state of soul also. For this reason, I always consider very important the relation. I will not speak about spirituality. I will speak about deep ecology. Better say that this deep connection with the the eco, which is the oikos, the lugar, your house, which is in sense of your house as a body and soul as a human being, and in your territory, the island, all the Balearic Island in this place, in this case. So starting from this, I would love to see this unity between all the people who have been working for this big change since many years. Focus it, even if we have different methodology to work, focus it with the same, with this vision I also thought before. Apparently it start, but it's not enough strong and structured, with a good structure. So all the other people, they are disconnected with all this possibility to change. They don't see. They need to see. They need to see how the people who are already work on this transition work together and make visible the option to create this community I thought before. Because now, okay, we have a permaculture, regenerative group, agriculture group with a lot of people. There's an amazing project, but still the connection with all the people, they don't know nothing about it. And so how we can really manage to involve all these people, which are the really one who needs to know, because they are the one they still consume and have a style of life they affect more, not only the economy, the system in general, also are part of the imminent collapse, the way how they live also. Even if I don't want to responsabilize the people who they have to work every day and they have a family, and they don't know how to survive. And sometimes they are so into them life that is a bigger story to think about, to change everything. And economy. How the first things is how I will gonna pay my bill. How I gonna face. I have a kid. Also, I'm a mother. I'm also a grandmother. I have also so I know exactly what is this story. But we have to. We have also to rename the collapse. Collapse doesn't have to be something which scare us, because you can collapse. That means a part of a system can collapse. We're still here. We have two hands. We have a brain. We have heart. We are really powerful. So if we focus start to do projects that are help us to build a new economy. Also, we can cooperative economy, collaborative economy. So maybe I can help you, and you will not face the poverty. As in, you can give food and you have clothes for you can pay the school, because we will interchange. So it's we have a lot of different way to redesign things. We just, what I would like to see is this.
Thank you, Barbara, for finishing it off with that point. And I think, for sure, there's a lot of scattering and a lot of disenfranchisement, if you like, of the individual communities. And I think, but there is a very beautiful connection that exists on this island, and living here makes you feel so much more connected than anywhere else I've ever lived, to the land, to the sea, to the ecology. And I think that, even just by being here, something has changed in everybody that's decided to move here and live here and stay here. So I think there is a very wonderful, as Brian Eno once called it, climate opportunity, to reframe that idea and to look at it as an opportunity for change and to get together and do something quickly. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for coming here today to have this conversation. It really, it means a lot. Your words were very powerful and brilliant and fascinating, and I'm very grateful that you could take the time to join us on the Gang of Witches Ibiza podcast.
Well, thank you so much for inviting us. It's been a pleasure and an eye-opener even. It's been wonderful to be here with my colleagues and with your good self. Thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you, Jo, for the invitation. I hope this conversation opened hearts and of a lot of people.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. For me, it's a pleasure and privilege to be here and say something about what is the vision and be with my friends Karen and Tania. I would say just one word to everybody, and then believe in the power we have. We can do it. We just have to start.
It was the Ibiza podcast of Gang of Witches, hosted by Jo Youle. See you at the next new moon. Until then, take care of yourselves. Ciao.
I'm calling upon my witches everywhere, my witches everywhere. I'm calling upon my sisters everywhere, my brothers everywhere. The time has come together.